One. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we've seen how the Germany, Italy have come together. We'll look at the rest of Europe now, including England and France, and how they come together after the 1870s, what we call the Belle Epoque, this period afterwards, and seeing how democratic things get. And let's just real quick focus back on Germany for a moment. Obviously, the Imperial German flag here as being the German tricolor, that national term we have. The term Reich starts being used as being the Second Reich, or the second great German Empire. Later on, obviously, the Third Reich will be Hitler, okay? And so we know that's where the Third Reich will come in. But we call this German Empire. It develops now after the Franco-Prussian War, the Second Reich. Bismarck becomes a big part of this. He tends to manipulate the Reichstag, that is the German Congress, and he kind of forces his policies on different people. It makes things a little bit controversial that way. Obviously, Kultur Kampf, we talked about this in class a little bit, but where he took all the powers out of the clergy, made it more civil, and only civil things, marriages we recognize, kind of ticked little people off, especially those who were Catholic. All the Jesuits were kicked out of Germany, all the education kind of stuff for Catholic priests, everybody was essentially done underneath the German government. So you notice that kind of going towards that non-religious type view and keeping that religious power out of Germany. And a lot of people that are German Catholics leave Germany because of this. He ends up kind of playing this chess game with the Pope, as we talk about his realpolitik, trying to play a chess game with the Pope and keep everybody happy. And people who's keeping happy with his movements with the Catholic Church are the liberals. Now, the problem for Otto von Bismarck becomes when Kaiser Wilhelm first dies and his son, Kaiser Wilhelm II, takes over. Now, Kaiser Wilhelm II, you notice one besides his awesome stash he's rocking is his one arm. He does have one withered arm. He has a arm that was kind of call it switchy inbredness, or whatever you want to call it, is not operating correctly. So he always hides it in his pictures, either by a sword or by a cloak or by something. And so it's kind of funny about Kaiser Wilhelm talked about that. He was related to Queen Victoria, and we'll see how eventually all of the major rulers of Europe are in some way or shape or form related to Queen Victoria, going from George V of England, who will be during World War I, William, the Emperor of Germany, the Russian Tsar. They're honestly all related in some way, shape, or form to Queen Victoria. One of the biggest things that Wilhelm does is he drops the OVB like a bad habit and basically kicks him out of office and drops him. They call it dropping the pilot, is a term you see in the cartoon here, where he kind of drops Bismarck as his prime minister and takes over as a sole ruler, as the emperor of Germany. So that's where we're going to see this kind of thing go towards World War I. So the question is, how democratic did Britain and France become? Well, let's take a look at France to start off. We'll get Britain afterwards. So we call the Third French Republic. So we had our first French Republic back during the French Revolution, our second French Republic, shut up the Revolution of 1848, which didn't work out too well either. And we'll see how the third one goes. Good luck, France. We'll see what happens. What happens is after 1870, when France is defeated in the Franco-Prussian War, Napoleon III gets out of Dodge. He's like, I'm done. He hops on his throne and gets the hell out of there. And they have a temporary government led by Adolphe Thiers, who is politician in France. And so the government tries fighting against the Germans, even though the war is technically not done yet. They keep trying to fight against the Germans, who are now surrounded Paris and taking over. So they get the whole Paris National Guard together, 350,000 people, and trying to keep the Germans out of Paris, and it doesn't work. Eventually, France does lose. Insert Jeff making a funny French joke here. And in 1871, France has surrendered after 40,000 Parisians are dead through artillery barrage, those kind of things. The problem with Thiers' government is that it was very conservative, royalist, and they kept fighting instead of, they took that peace, too quick. They didn't fight enough was the argument they had, that they didn't do enough, you know what I mean? And so you had these Prussian troops marching to Paris in 1871, and the French government, technically wasn't in Paris, it was in Versailles. And so what they do is they get out of there, go to Versailles, where Louis had his government, that royalist type stronghold. And a lot of the Parisians were ticked off by this because Paris had been the seat of government since the Revolution. And so try to get that order back. And that order was and obviously when the French want to change things, they do a revolt. So the Paris Commune was elected. And called the Communards is essentially a communist type group organization that elects itself essentially at the Hotel Ville as the new government of Paris. And so you have barricades and building fighting and all kinds of stuff against the military of Paris being in revolt again. So you have the troops coming in from Versailles, who are the military troops, and you have the Communards taking over Paris. And so the Paris Commune was suppressed by the French army and was known as Bloody Week, when a lot of Parisians get slaughtered by French troops. So here you see examples of the battle going on. You have cannons in the streets of Paris. You tear buildings apart to put block barricades up, all those kind of things. There's a truly a Civil War battle in the streets of Paris. Paris City Hall is now a vacant shell of itself, all burned out. And the Communards tried to do a lot of different reforms, try to make Paris a better place. They allowed trade unions, they allowed worker cooperatives, and try to get factories that had been vacant for so long started up. And they tried to find ways to make unemployment better and try to make unemployment exchanges and work programs that are better than the workhouses and poorhouses that existed before this in Europe. They wanted to do education, so they tried to do public education at a basic level. They didn't want any church-controlled schools. But they want a public control school set up, and they want to try and get schools for girls as well, which is a pretty unique kind of thing. So they took all this stuff on in a year, and it was just crazy to try and do. They even tried to make nurseries and daycares for working mothers, which had never been seen before in Europe. And they basically bit off way more than they could chew, and they were trying to scramble, make all this stuff work, and it just didn't go. People question, was the Communards the first ever communist revolution? Some would say yes, some would say no. Some would argue that Vladimir Lenin was later inspired by the Communards as he tried to make his revolution happen in Russia, become Soviet Union. You have 6,000 Communards either arrested or killed in this whole war. So obviously it was a kind of a big deal. You see it going forward here. You see some of the Communard casualties of this whole thing. Well, after the Communard falls, we do declare the Third French Republic. And here's how the Third French Republic is going to look. It looks like this, right? Kind of a dude-ish type person. That's not a dude. Whatever. Anyway. The Republic. We've seen this in France before. We've seen republics fail left and right. So they're kind of, skeptical as it is, okay? Lots of rivalries happen, okay? The issue is that the Third French Republic, while unstable, was also the best French Republic of the 19th century. It lasted longer than any other regime since the French Revolution. But they were so fractured, they couldn't get together, and they're also rocked by scandals left and right. They had a president who was head of the state who was basically there. Okay, he got to nominate new heads of government. He got to do a lot of foreign affairs stuff. He could dissolve one of the chambers of Congress. That was really about it. But he had very, very little political power, not like our president we think of in the United States. They had a Senate, which the mayors and governors elected, so kind of like the United States Senate to a degree back then. But the countryside was way overrepresented because most of France is still countryside at this point. They had 9-year terms for their senators, and it was very, very conservative. So they had a chance to block legislation coming from the lower house. So it wasn't very effective that way. Their Chamber of Deputies is kind of like our House of Representatives, where you had 600 people elected through a universal male suffrage. Kind of a great thing. But there were many political groupings within this group. You had socialists and Republicans and radicals and monarchists, all different ideas. While there wasn't any kind of official political system in France, these groups all kind of made their own coalitions and would not work together. So while the structure is there for a French Republic, it's a very, very it's honestly just inefficient and doesn't get a lot of things done. And then it's rocked by all kinds of scandals. And the scandals are a big thing that are going to hurt the French Republic. So first one was Boulanger Affair, which is Bonapartism without Bonaparte, his nickname for it. The army was all monarchists is the issue, okay? And the army, all the generals are monarchists, left over from days of the monarchy. And the Minister of War, General Georges Boulanger, was a Republican. He was more of a liberal type person. And he was super popular with the troops. He would hang out with them. He was, seen as a very well-respected person. And this is scary to a very conservative government because the conservative government sees this as a chance for revolution. And so, obviously, like any good revolution, every good government, they pull him out of power. And he was this huge, big, focal point. And people thought, there's a this big national figure. And he was this conservative opposition to the Republican government. And so basically they thought he was a plot to overthrow the Republic and it's seen as part of that plot. And so when he was summoned to trial, he fled to Belgium where he eventually committed suicide because he thought he was in trouble. And he thought that, there was this, big conservative witch hunt to try and take out the government. And so his fall really increased the confidence of the Republic because they thought that, hey, it's legit as they weed out people who are maybe not the best people. And they find ways that, are looking at. But obviously you see how this whole scandal about trying to revolutions, all those kind of things are happening here. You have the Panama Canal issue where the French company that works at the Panama Canal, so developing it, takes all these bribes from the government to get money for their things. So we have 800,000 francs being 1 billion francs being donated by 800,000 investors for the Panama Canal, and it doesn't go anywhere. And a lot of these government officials took bribes from the company to withhold all this news, and people told people, oh, things are really, really great. And they really weren't that great. And so a lot of people lose a lot of money. And a lot of the accused went unpunished because there was enough evidence, except for one. There were 2 Jews who were also involved, and they got the most press coverage. And so, in a way, they kind of blame everything on these 2 Jewish guys. So we're going to see this big move of anti-Semitism that happens across the length of the late 19th century in Europe. And really, the scandal to the public proved that everything was really, really corrupt, and that there was this huge anti-Semitism that increased at this time, as we see all the scandals that go through France. The biggest scandal by far is going to be the Dreyfus Affair. The Dreyfus Affair it happens with the French military. It involves documents. Right? So essentially, they found this French military document in the wastebasket at German embassy in Paris, and so obviously it's not a good thing. Okay. The person they think is a spy is this dude named Alfred Dreyfus. He's a French army captain, and he was from a very wealthy Alsatian family. Remember, Alsace is the area that France got from Germany during the Franco-Prussian War. Now, remember, he's also Jewish, and there are a couple of people who are Jews on general staff, and so he's kind of this 2-for-1 going against him right now in terms of being Alsatian as well as being Jewish, and so people aren't really sure about him if he is a truly legit guy or not. So they basically blame him for this information being leaked or being a spy, and he is sent to Devil's Island, French Guiana, where he was, basically the worst prison that's out there. The real person, who did this was Major Stasi, who was tried and found not guilty. He really did it, and so the whole thing is blamed on Dreyfus. Emile Zola comes up. Emile Zola was the great writer, author looking for equality, who writes J'accuse, and basically publicized that the army covered everything up, that the army is corrupt, the government is corrupt. He was prosecuted for libel for arguing against the government, got sentenced to prison for a year. All kind of crazy stuff happened as this becomes a big deal. But obviously, there's different levels of things happening here: anti-Semitism, corruption, government, all this kind of things going on here. And so eventually, we basically have 2 sides in France. We have the Dreyfusards and the anti-Dreyfusards. So the question of the Dreyfusards saying, hey, the people who are for rightness and correctness about, being intellectual and Freemasons and socialists and ever being equal, all that kind of stuff. And the anti-Dreyfusards who said, hey, the honor and integrity of France, the army is bigger. There's a bigger fish to fry. I mean, we're looking for the whole versus one person. And so these moral decisions also kind of come up in France here as well, where you see some people call him a traitor, some people call him not a traitor. He actually gets a new trial a few years later, 1899. He comes back. I mean, obviously years in prison change a man, and especially when you're put in there when you're not a criminal. And he was found guilty again, but with more circumstances, given a pardon, still serves in World War I, lives through World War I, and dies honorably in 1935. So we'll talk a little of the Dreyfus Affair a little more in class. We do see the Zionist movement kind of get here, inspire this one. We're going to finish off the Zionist movement with Theodor Herzl. The question was about the Jewish state, and obviously your textbook talks about this as well in terms of, how are Jews being treated and stuff in Europe during this late 19th century, and not very well, obviously. And so Herzl actually helps create the first ever Jewish state in Switzerland, and the idea of a Zionist Congress and a state base for Jewish people. And there's this huge wave of anti-Semitism is going on in Europe, and a way for Jews to kind of be protected. At the same time, we have anti-Catholicism happening, where you have this anti-clerical, anti-church Republican group that's in the National Assembly, and they're really anti-Catholic, which is really weird for the French. And they're going to stay in power for a long, long time. And these Ferry laws come in from Jules Ferry, who wants to try and change education, make education more public, less church-based. And so he says that only the state could grant degrees. You cannot only get a degree from a church or from a church school, and that there was to be no longer religious instruction in state schools. So kind of one of those first divides of church and state, and that a lot of these religious orders were kicked out of France, not allowed to teach anymore. And basically made state training for teachers. So we start seeing this big, huge divide happen between church and state in France as it goes forward. And we're going to stop there, guys. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. As we're looking at France, we'll look at some documents on this in class when we get back to class.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. And Aaron says bye. And it's not ending. 14 minutes.